I yield a minute and a half from the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Bergman.
Gentleman's recognized for a minute and a half.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in opposition to the Articles of need to be looked in the eye by all their representatives. Today is the culmination of the Democrats' 3-year-long quest to delegitimize the president. This has been in the works since November 2016 and was all but promised when the began without a formal vote in the House and was continued over these past several months, willfully trampling on decades of bipartisan precedent. No due process was classified and leaking only details that fit their narrative. If this isn't partisan politics, I don't know what is. Holding our elected but the impeachment votes today represent the worst of Washington, D.C. Yet another reason my constituents are so disillusioned with the process and disappointed by the 116th Congress. Michigan's 1st District sent me to Washington to help rural Michiganders and other people around the country keep more of their hard-earned currency, not to impeach our duly elected president. With that, I urge my colleagues to vote against the article.
Gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from California, Ms. Barragan.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, it is of impeachment. As this chamber debates 2 articles of impeachment against the president for his abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, I want him for the Constitution and our democracy. When my immigrant mom became a United States citizen, she took an oath and allegiance to our country and Constitution. When I stood on this floor, the president abused his power when he used his official office and power to ask a foreign government to interfere in our elections. When he asked a foreign government for a personal favor to dig up dirt on his political opponent. And then he tried to cover it up. Today we say no more. Today we say we will not allow this president to abuse his power and endanger our national security. Is above the law, not even this president. I yield back.
Gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Madam.
Recognized for a minute and a half.
I thank the gentleman. Since before inauguration, the press and members of this Congress have been for impeachment. Members refused to attend the inauguration. They called for impeachment. They voted for impeachment, creating and manufacturing evidence. Recall and votes of no confidence are not included in our Constitution for a reason. Our system, if such evidence existed, there would be an agreement in this chamber, but there is not. There is not an agreement because there is not evidence. Madison and Hamilton warned us that this might happen, that impeachment would veer what this is. This is bitterly and nakedly partisan. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle have made a mockery of this process and this using the power of their office, all to settle the political score they were unable to resolve at the ballot box. Madam Speaker, they hope that if they repeat them over and over and stay on message, you will believe their charges. Repeating things that between the 2 presidents is clear. President Trump was interested in getting to the bottom of what happened in the 2016 election. He asked the Ukrainians to work with our Attorney General. They got the assistance money and the meeting they desired. These are not crimes. These are disagreements over foreign policy and the sad, it would be laughable, Madam Speaker. My colleagues are not driven by a quest for facts or truth. They are driven by their partisan animus and a timetable. These are the reckless and irresponsible act of elitists in the swamp of our republic. I urge a no vote and I yield.
Gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I would remind the gentleman evidence, including the president's own words and actions, which is corroborated and supported by indirect and circumstantial evidence. The record leaves lawyer Rudy Giuliani pushed Ukraine to investigate Vice President Biden and a debunked conspiracy theory about the 2016 elections. President Trump directed U.S. officials and President Zelensky himself to work with Mr. Giuliani. Held critical military aid for Ukraine, and President Trump stonewalled Congress investigation to cover up his misconduct. I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Illinois.
Madam Speaker, this should not be a partisan vote. This is a vote about America. It's a vote about our democracy and our oath to the Constitution. Enemies, foreign and domestic, and we all know that what President Trump did was wrong. We all know it's wrong to withhold foreign aid as a political subpoenas. And we know it's wrong to default to silly partisan process arguments rather than to rise and defend this beautiful but all too fragile position for personal advantage. It's on us to somberly uphold and defend the responsibility that the founders bestowed on us. So when you talk about partisanship, I'd remind you of those great words of Lincoln. Partisanship rather than let the nation survive. I'm proud to be of the party that would accept partisanship rather than let the nation perish. So in this moment, the answer is clear, not because we want to impeach, but because we must. Vote your character. That's how you're going to be judged, and that's how we're all going to be judged. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Georgia has an hour and 44 and a half minutes. Gentleman from New York has an
Time I yield a minute and a half to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Tipton.
gentleman's recognized for a minute and a half.
Madam Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to this partisan impeachment process. Report. In fact, impeachment efforts began shortly after the president was elected. The theatrics, political posturing have ensured that this body is not actually pursuing the calls by some that refuse to accept the 2016 election results. Neither of the articles receiving a vote justify the removal of the president from office. The first article suggests that the president pressured a foreign government aid without a prearranged agreement. This is unsubstantiated. The second article is premised on the obstruction occurred when the White House ignored subpoenas issued by the House. Our federal courts are the ultimate arbiter. Republican and Democrat both have dealt with these issues and claimed executive privilege. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I intend to vote no on these articles, and I would encourage my colleagues to be able to do the same.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Arizona.
Recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, today I will vote to impeach President Donald Trump for abuse of power and obstruction of at straws while living in an alternate universe where facts don't exist. To those still unwilling to search their souls, ask yourself, would you support a Democratic president using taxpayer a Republican political opponent based on false Russian conspiracy theories? Of course not. That's absurd. Any president can undermine our most sacred tradition, our elections. In a few hours, every member will make a choice. Will you fall into the age-old political trap of thinking blind partisanship is all that matters? Or will you vote Trump and every future president will know that they are not above the law and will be held accountable for their actions? I have made my choice. I hope every member puts the defense of our nation.
Gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I need to yield a minute and a half to the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Smith.
Gentleman's recognized for a minute and a half.
Madam Speaker, Newly elected President of the United States. Impeachment is importantly established in our Constitution. The impeachment of a president has only happened twice in our country's 243-year political purposes. The House majority is trying to remove President Trump from office based on secondhand indirect accounts. They offer no evidence of a crime, but instead are purposely broad to fit the majority's narrative. Less than 1 year until the next of the American people. This lopsided and hyper-partisan biased impeachment process has been predetermined as an outcome from the very beginning. This is an unfortunate day in the history of our great country. In the future. Surely there will be disagreements between a president and Congress for many years to come. Instead of unnecessarily dividing our country, as we are seeing today, we should be looking at ways.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, although the violation of the federal criminal statute is neither necessary nor sufficient to justify impeachment, President Trump's conduct violated the federal anti-bribery statute very clearly. Madam Speaker, I now yield 1 minute.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the chairman. Madam Speaker, today I vote to impeach President Donald Trump. I don't hate the president, but I love my country and I have no other choice. Voting for these articles of impeachment is the only moral course of action, the only way to honor our oath of office. I have no doubt that the votes I cast today will stand the test of time. I'm so disappointed that my Republican friends approve of the president's abuses of power and solicitation of foreign interference in our elections. This is the very definition of what the president has done is deeply wrong. They know that they would vote without hesitation to impeach a Democratic president who had done these things. I remind all Americans the president did not which have led to the articles of impeachment today. For the sake of our democracy, our Constitution, and our country.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was just amazed by what the chairman just said. If it was obviously that he violated the bribery statute clearly, then why didn't we add it as an article of impeachment? The reason why? It didn't. With that, I yield a minute.
For a minute and a half.
Thank you, ma'am. Article 2, Section 4 of the United States Constitution states that the President of the United States may be removed from office for treason, bribery, prosecutor. I am confident that no court would accept these articles of impeachment as having met the standards set forth by our founding fathers. The impeachment articles rely almost exclusively on hearing of wrongdoing. As a former district attorney, I'm dismayed that the Democrats have submitted articles of impeachment against a sitting president using circumstantial. Additionally, the charges levied against the president in the articles of impeachment lack historical precedent and are motivated by pure political reason. Democrats will have set a dangerous precedent by undoing America's votes for president because a single party disagreed with the 2006. I urge my colleagues to vote no on the articles of impeachment, and I yield back.
To the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Thompson.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I find no pleasure coming to the floor today to consider impeachment. I ran for Congress to represent my community and to serve the country. Intelligence Committee, I understand the threat that foreign actors can play in our elections. Every elected official must dedicate themselves to protecting our democracy of voting. It was abuse of power by the president to ask a foreign nation to interfere in our election to benefit his personal and political interest and to condition bipartisan on that interference. Unchecked, these actions could lead us down a path that will unravel the. But in the interest of defending our nation, I will vote for the articles of impeachment. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Georgia. Gentleman's recognized for a minute and a half.
Thank the gentleman from Georgia. Mr. Speaker, our founders intentionally did not embrace recalls or votes of no confidence. Rather, we demand from Congress evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors. And while they may reasonably view the infamous phone call and negotiations with the Ukrainians as something less than perfect, they are not. In just over 10 months, though, the people are free to decide, and we should let them. The eyes of the world are upon us, Madam Speaker. The press galleries are full. Our floor is filled with members. My colleagues wax eloquent about the constitutions they found under mothballs. Where is respect for the Constitution when the People's House daily refuses to do its actual job while shredding federalism and limited government? Today in Mexico, a young girl will be ages and play race politics in the false name of compassion. Today in New York, a young mother will be coerced into abortion by taxpayer-funded Planned Parenthood, while we allow the genocide of the unborn in the false name of choice. Today across the ravaged by government and insurance bureaucrats empowered in the false name of coverage. And today our children inherit $100 million of debt an hour, borrowed in the false name of what government can provide. In this conduct, one might ask if America would be better off taking the first 435 names out of the phone book to represent us in the United States House than what is on display here today. Today is not a dark day because the American Washington is broken, and we're taking our country back. I yield back.
Gentleman from New York.
Yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentlelady from California, Ms. Matsui.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today with a heavy heart. I came to Congress to serve the great people of Sacramento and to build a better and on Robbie. The facts before us are crystal clear. We heard testimony from 17 brave patriots who value our democracy and the Constitution. They testified to approve money in exchange for dirt on a political rival. And worse, that he continues to invite foreign powers to violate our sovereignty, even to are impeachable offenses that represent a clear and present danger to our country. That's why the only answer is to act and stop President Trump immediately so that he cannot violate the next election. For the sake of our country and our democracy.
Gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield a minute and a half to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Smucker.
Gentleman's recognized for a minute and a half.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to ask of the American people worth. When the American people are dissatisfied with their government, the primary tool that the Constitution gives them to make a change is their vote. From every part of this nation packed the polls to elect Donald J. Trump to be the President of the United States. The country wanted a disruptor, first. But sadly, on that very same day, Democrats had no plan or interest in honoring the vote of the American people. They were going to attempt from day one to remove him from office. Right after the president was sworn in, the Washington Post wrote, "The campaign to impeach President Trump has begun." Even before he took office, shortly after he takes office. So, House Democrats have been planning for this day since January 2017. It's clear that facts have never mattered to them. They intended only to fulfill their divisive partisan agenda. Again, I ask, how much is the trust of the American people worth? Because after the vote today, be sure that the American people will have lost their trust in our institution. They will have lost their trust in Congress. And most importantly, they will have lost trust that their vote counts.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Impeaching a president is one of the most solemn and consequential decisions the United States Congress can make. It's not an action that I or my fellow House colleagues take lightly. Investigations and hearings conducted by the House prove overwhelmingly endangered our national security. President Trump also issued a blanket order prohibiting all executive office personnel from testifying, responding to subpoenas, obstructed the legitimate constitutional obligation of Congress. The president's actions leave me no choice. Now, I will uphold my oath of office to preserve and protect our Constitution, and my promise to my constituents to carefully analyze all issues before me. Impeachment against President Donald John Trump. I yield back.
Gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield a minute and a half to the gentleman from Dunn.
Gentleman's recognized for a minute.
Man. I am disappointed in a broken and partisan process that has consumed the House Democrats. We were told this investigation was going to be bipartisan behind closed doors with no attempt at a fair hearing. All this was done deliberately in an effort to undo the results of the 2016 election. Madam Speaker, my constituents in Florida us to actually fix the surprise medical billing to lower the cost of prescription drugs. Instead, we're here a week before Christmas voting to impeach Trump on the strength of nothing but rumors. We've wasted almost a year on this process while House Democrats chose political American people. This shameful vote to impeach our president will be a lasting stain. I yield back.
Gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from Oregon, Mr. DeFazio.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank the gentleman. It's clear-cut. The President of the United States has violated his oath of office and betrayed the Constitution and the American people. He admitted to soliciting assistance from a foreign leader to interfere election campaign. That's a violation of the law, a violation of the Constitution, and a betrayal of the American people and an impeachable offense. Overwhelming evidence also demonstrates the president withheld the young new president of Ukraine under attack from Russia. Now, the gentleman from Georgia says Ukraine by Russia. Vladimir Putin, you know, Trump's friend, and he withheld that aid until the whistleblower report came out. Then the aid was Congress voted for that aid. The president signed the bill. That is another impeachable offense. And the Judiciary Committee has put together an extensive document which shows that there is evidence of bribery and wire fraud. The president's actions threaten the continuation of our representative democracy. I'm proud.
Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I am glad to know that Mr. Trump was giving them lethal aid, actually something to fight back with, not what was previously given to them. And there was, again, from the if you're coercing somebody, if there was no pressure felt. But yet we don't seem to get that part on this floor debate today. So with that, I yield a minute and a half to the gentleman from Montana, Mr. Gianforte.
Gentleman's recognized for a minute and a half.
Articles of impeachment in our history. House Democrats' hyper-partisan impeachment has been a sham since day one, driven by those whose bitter rage against President Trump has blinded. Turn the results of the 2016 election the day President Trump won. Earlier this year, Speaker Pelosi said impeachment is so divisive to the country, overwhelming and bipartisan, I don't think we should go down that path. None of those standards have been met. None. Made-for-TV show. They would be comedy if impeachment weren't so serious and grave. Witnesses denied awareness of an impeachable offense. And because the majority is no bipartisanship, compelling, overwhelming, bipartisan, Speaker Pelosi has not met her own criteria for impeachment. But here we are. Message, the American people have rejected it. I will vote against this partisan impeachment sham. Let's get back to the work that the American people sent us here. Charade. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New York.
Gonzalez.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
America, a sad day for Texas and a very sad day for the people I represent. I'm not gleeful for today. I came to Congress to lower the cost of prescription drugs, fight for a debt-free education, improve the cost of I did not come to Congress to impeach a sitting president, but we've been given no choice. He has eroded the foundations of our democracy and used the office of the presidency for personal and political gain. Our founding fathers limits. Thus, they enshrined in the Constitution a system of checks and balances. We cannot and will not lower the ethical standards of our presidency. We cannot afford to wither like a cheap flower in bad weather, watching our democracy. That is not the America the world knows and loves, and it's certainly not the America we would be proud to have our future generations. To impeach the President of the United States and fulfill my oath to the Constitution, and I yield back.
Gentleman from North Dakota.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1.5 minutes to.
Is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Throughout this process, the American people have learned of bungling foreign policy decisions, but we have not heard of bribery or extortion. Allegations of these two crimes aren't even mentioned in the. We have seen a rushed process divide our country. Today, accusations have been hurled at each other, questioning one another's integrity. Today, a dangerous precedent will be a weaponized political tool. We know how this partisan process will end this evening, but what happens tomorrow? Can This institution has a fabled history of passing legislation that has not only changed our country, but has inspired the world. This feat has been possible because goal, make a more perfect union. We can contribute to this history if we recognize the simple fact that way more unites our country. Tomorrow, can we start focusing on that?
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Davis.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Country, this is indeed a sad day for America, but it's a good day for our Constitution. It is a sad day for our country because President Trump has defied our Constitution, It is clear that President Trump places himself above the law, above our Constitution, and above the expectations of the American people. At my last town hall meeting, which was college in Chicago, someone asked the question, what is our position on impeachment? Madam Speaker, impeach. When I speak for the people of the 7th District of Illinois, and my vote will be impeach. Balance of my time.
Gentleman from North Dakota.
Madam Speaker, I yield two minutes to my friend from Texas, Mr. Gohmert.
Gentleman's recognized.
In 1998, Senator Schumer said, and I quote, this impeachment will be used as a routine tool to fight political battles. Prediction. It was a promise, and now it's playing out. It's exactly what's being done here. And for those that say we don't address the impeachment serves two purposes. Number one, stop the investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice and Ukraine into the corruption of the U.S. Election in 2016. You said this was about, this terrible Russia collusion. It's about emoluments, it's about bribery, it's about extortion. It's changed, but one thing hasn't changed. It's always been there. But let's be honest. The president turning his back on Ukraine, that happened in 2000. Georgia. What happened? Bush put sanctions on Russia to teach them a lesson. What happened after that? Well, in March of 2009, Hillary Clinton was sent over to Russia with a reset button to say, Bush overreacted. We're okay. Green light to Russia to invade Ukraine. And what do? Oh, yeah, you send blankets and MREs. They can is what the Obama administration did. This is a travesty, and we're in big trouble because Schumer was right. Now be used for political battles, and this country's end is now in sight. I hope I don't live to see it. This is an outrage. I yield back.
Speaker, I am deeply concerned that any member of the House would spout Russian propaganda on the floor of the House. I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman.
Recognized for the House will come to order. The gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you.
The House will come to order. From New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Speaker, the United States Constitution is explicit. Bribery is an impeachable offense. Bribery involves the abuse of power, and the President of the United States a bribe of a foreign leader to interfere in an election that he was afraid he could not win honorably, fairly, or freely. You, President of Ukraine, open and announce an investigation of my $391 million in military aid and give you the stature-amplifying White House meeting that you need. This is a this for that, something for something transaction. A foreign leader is an abuse of power and a federal crime. I yield back.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bill Rackus.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues who have toiled honorably in defense of the Constitution and the rule of law under difficult circumstances, Madam Speaker. You know, Madam, found ourselves in this position today. Every time I step into this chamber, I'm humbled to be serving in the great However, it's deeply disappointing that the hyper-partisanship that has gripped this country has made its way into this chamber. Consensus builder who works across the aisle to get things done for the American people. But when it comes to the matter of impeachment, the entire process has been politically motivated. There's absolutely no evidence, which is why I will vote no. This whole process has been a ploy to circumvent the will of the States. It is a national disgrace and sets a dangerous precedent. But we are a great nation, and we will survive this indignity. Let's put the Speaker and get to work. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute.
For 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the question that will be answered today is, will members honor their oath to uphold impeachment based on a policy disagreement or the election results of 2016? No one is above the law. The president must be held. The process is not a hoax or witch hunt. President Trump just opposes it. Not even President Donald J. Trump. The president abused his power by pressuring you campaign. Impeachment is a constitutional remedy for these actions. Trump betrayed his oath elections. Those who are against the impeachment inquiry are willing to turn a blind eye to constitutional violations by the president. As a nation, we have no other in the United States of America. In his own words, no intelligent person